So hello, ladies. It's been a long time.
It has been a while. It's been a while. Hello, it's good to be with you too.
Too
Like,
long. So today we're going to talk about what does it mean to be a social justice educator. And so before we start that discussion, before we jump right in it, let's talk about what's giving us life these days after a summer apart. So what's giving you life, Carmen?
me? Oh, what's giving me life? I don't know why this is in my head, but I just started, well, over the, I don't know, 7 or 8 months, I've started to get into tarot cards. I don't know if I've talked about that on this before.
Cool.
Yeah, my sister is like really, really spiritual, and she's into like, she reads playing cards and tarot cards, and she practices the Yoruba religion, and she got me into it. And I ended up buying a few decks of tarot cards, and I do like a weekly read. And it's just kind of fun and inspiring every week to like, get this message from the universe and see how it plays out. I especially like I'll do it as part of like the week, kind of starting the week routine. But I really like at the end of the week to look at the cards again and then see like, oh, did it apply? I mean, I pulled some and I don't even remember. I feel like I got like the 7 of Pentacles, and the Pentacles are usually about like material gain, and a lot about, there was something about 7 of Wands and the Hanged Man, and it was about like grounding yourself, and something too about like forget the haters. So I always take that message. What about you, Sandra?
Sleep.
Literally, that gives you life.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's interesting. I think sometimes I feel like the more I sleep, the more I want to sleep instead of like waking up invigorated. But I think this week that school started, it really has been like an invigorating. Okay, I'm ready for the day. I'm looking forward to driving to work and getting to work and having my cup of coffee and meeting with students. And so, and seeing my coworkers, like it's been a long time. And there was a couple of coworkers that I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in years. Like it's been years since I've seen you, right? So definitely just getting back into a routine is giving me life, and it's exciting and it feels like new, right? And getting back into a routine of leaving the house, not in your chanclas, there's actual clothes, but it was easy to start thinking of like what's not giving me life, like what's frustrating, and I'm like, no, I have to change my mentality and look at what the positive is of giving me.
Oh, so I should say what's giving me life.
Yeah, what's giving you life, Monique?
So I think a couple things. One thing is definitely seeing the students. I was here last semester, but the campus was different. Not as many people were here. I was also teaching really early, so it felt different. But this time, it's like people are more comfortable about being back. The classrooms are full. There's just I'm teaching new books. It's just so vibrant in a way that I haven't felt in a long time. So that's really like energizing me. The other thing that's kind of giving me life is like now that we've been sitting and we come back, it's like there are all these like problems that seem like they can't be solved, but I don't like, there's something in me that doesn't want to accept that, right? And so my brain is kind of like going around and thinking about these issues, these problems, like whether they have to do with systems or interpersonal relationships or whatever. And I like that. Like even if I don't come to a solution, I like that my brain is working on those things. It just feels good to kind of like work on those things, like and think about them and look at them. And so that's actually giving me life, even though they're problems, almost like being hopeful about there being a solution is helping me feel okay that the problem exists. So that's kind of
Yeah,
that's
it's a
giving me
good
life.
perspective.
So that's you when you first popped up the things of like what we talked about today, the first question that came into my mind was like, what is a social justice educator? And so I'm wondering if either of you want to school me on like what does that mean? Like what does it mean to be a social justice educator? Because there might be multiple definitions and there might be a lot of people that consider themselves that and they aren't, or don't consider themselves that and they are, right? So what does it mean?
Mm.
Well, I've always thought of a social justice educator being somebody who mentors and or helps students find their voice,
Mm.
and learn to advocate for themselves, and learning the system,
Mm.
right? There's all these ins and outs of the system, and it's all the systems, not just like our educational system, but it's also like our interpersonal relationships, right? It's also our self healing, right? It's also the career system, and navigating through all of those systems, and being able to find your identity, and as an educator to be able to see everybody individually and who they are. I've had coworkers say, well, I just look at the classroom and everybody's the same color, and I don't see anybody's differences. And like, and I'm like, ooh, girl, I like your eyelashes. Like, girl, I like your hair. Dude, I like those shoes, bro.
Mm.
Like, like being able to see people's individualities is so important and helps students be seen, right? And when students feel seen, they feel like they belong. When they feel like they belong, then they start being more curious about, well, if I belong here, then what else is here for me to get into? Like, what else is here to help me get through this? That's how I see myself as a social justice educator, is to be able to say, hey, I see you, and you do belong here, and you may not feel like it, but this is your space, right? And let's make it your space. I was just telling the students today, I don't like these beige walls in this classroom. So come to my office. I have posters, and let's put some color up,
Mm.
right? Let's make this our classroom, right? And so our puente classes. And so they're like, oh yeah, okay. And I don't know. I don't know if that's right or if it's not, like, but that's what my mentors taught me. And so that's what I feel like my role is as a counselor, as an instructor, is to say, okay, you belong here and this is how. And this is what you're entitled to. Because there's also instructors with white privilege that automatically assume that. Students with white privilege that automatically assume that. They know how to work the system and they know what they're entitled to. So why can't our Black and brown students feel that way as well?
There's so much justice in that. I remember one of the first things I learned while working with Emoja was this, the concept of I see you, right?
Mhm.
And acknowledging that the person has been seen. And a huge part of that was just because when you're coming from a marginalized community, you often aren't seen or don't see yourself in the spaces that we have to enter into, right? And so I can see how a large part of the justice work is just making sure that the community you serve is being seen, right? That you don't do the thing where you're like, I don't see color and I don't see, right? But because that means you're not taking the time to look, right? You're not taking the time to appreciate the stories, the experience, the cultural capital, all of those things that people are bringing in. And so without taking that time, you're doing an injustice, right? You're actually harming that person by saying that I'm going to ignore who you are. So yeah, that's really beautiful. I'm glad you're here
Mm.
doing that, Sandra.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that, I mean, I really appreciate the piece around student voice and also helping them navigate the system. And I think that part of being a social justice educator, I would add to that, is about helping them interrogate the system and question it, and to see if the system really works, and who it serves and how it serves, and resisting the system, and figuring out. And I think that's part of that navigation, about like when you're going to dip in the system and when you're not, when you're going to resist and when you're not, and empowering them to be able to do so. And it's really tricky. And I think part of being a social justice educator is that it's also part of your own development as a human being, that it's just not about something you do with the students, but something that you are investigating for yourself and who you are, that it's not, to me, and it's a lifestyle, basically, it's a way that you live your life, when you are engaged in social justice and trying to bring it to the education system. And I feel like it's really tricky, like some people might think they're a social justice educator because they introduce literature by people of color. I think that's more of being like a multiculturalist or something like that. To me, as social justice educators, introducing that literature and talking about how that literature challenges and resists the system, and challenges and resists, racism, sexism, and what other oppressions that writer might represent, but also about how you are in your classroom. Like, you can't really be a social justice educator and uphold the oppressive system at the same time, right? And I think that's like the tricky part. And I know it's something that is kind of a journey, because we've all been so ingrained in this system, and it's difficult to unlearn. And so it's something that I am, trying to figure out. It just took me a long time to like get comfortable being more flexible with deadlines, getting more comfortable with students not having the book or not having read, and just figuring things out, versus being punitive and harsh. So I feel like that's part of it, is it's like not just the content, but like how you are, how you connect to students in the space that you create. Like you were talking about, Sandra, bringing color into the room, bringing in posters, right? Because part of that beigeness is part of the system, right? Like, I don't know. It's like we're not people or something like that. Like, we're not full humans with that beigeness. So I think all of that is part of being a social justice educator.
Can you give an example, Carmen, of unlearning the oppressive system?
Yeah, it's so.
And you touched on an example right now, is like being more flexible and sensitive to due dates.
Yeah, so something I'm trying in my class is like and this is actually something that I got from you, Monique, because I remember that you said that you had talked to your students about, like you were giving them, I don't know if it was an outline on how to write an essay or something. And you were like, here's your tool of oppression, right? And so I was like, yeah, I want to make that stuff more transparent in my classroom. I really want to call it out, for what it is. So today I did a talk about white supremacy and how it's embedded in college English classes. And it's, I feel like I wasn't quite sure like what I was doing and how to do it, but I was like, I'm just going to try, and see what I learned from trying to talk about this. And I talked about the white supremacist values and like 4 that I see in the classroom. So for example, one that they talked about that comes up is perfectionism, right? So this idea of like having to be perfect and having to get all the answers right. But mostly how as instructors will often point out what's wrong versus what's right, what the student is doing well, And so I talked about how like what I'm really focused on is growth and learning and not about perfection, and really wanting to, accentuate the positive, the things that they're doing well. And even saying that out loud, it helps me remember it for myself that like, Carmen, you got to do that. You have to make sure that you're doing that, because now you're telling the students that you're doing that, right?
And now they will check you now too when you
they'll check me. Yeah, they'll hold me accountable to it, So I feel like it's like a good and such a healing. I talk to them about white supremacy and like how we're all impacted by it, even as people of color, and how we internalize it, and like we have to heal from the effects of it, and like how many of them, experience perfectionism, how many of them are hard on themselves. So I feel like even bringing it up and trying this different approach is healing for all of us, right? Because it's like, I got to not be hard on myself if I want them to not be hard on themselves, and for me to not be hard on them too, So I don't know. I think that is like one way that I'm trying to, kind of give language to this oppressive system and also like do something different around it too. Yeah. But I know you guys do a lot of stuff.
I was just gonna say that thank you, Carmen. And I think part of it for me is me not being a confrontational person, just being able to say we are all under this supremacy and white supremacy and oppressive system. Is like, like, did I just say that? Like, how can I then uphold not following into that trap, right? Or not following into that structure? And so, but I think I agree with you in saying that, then it's a healing process for all of us, right? And I think especially as an educator, when we are doing the work, to do all of the work, like to name it too, right? And so I think that's one thing that I sometimes don't feel as comfortable in doing, in naming it that, calling it out, and that's exactly, what we're following. I don't know. It's just, it just caught me.
Yeah.
Right, when you were sharing that. So thank you.
I mean, it's hard. I mean, I was like pretty terrified, I was like, I don't know how the students are going to take this. I don't know who may identify as white or have, white heritage, and like how they're going to, grapple with this. And I also recorded it for my online class too. And I have no idea, who's in that class and how they're going to read it. But I do think, talking about it as systemic and not necessarily about individual people, and about how like we all play a role in it. And I think that kind of creates more space for everybody to engage in thinking about it. But it's scary, and it is really tricky.
But also, like, I remember when we were having the conversation, and it was like, I just, the tools of oppression. Here's your tool, right? I often too, like, here's the key to the gate, right? Like, right, here's another key to the gate, like, because it's like, in my mind, like, there's so many of these iron bars, locked iron bars that we've just been put up, that have been put up in front of people that have been marginalized. And so I think it is like when you talk about it as a systemic thing and people can recognize that a portion of their lives has been negatively impacted by the fact that these things exist, then, like there's more agency in, like, you're giving them agency, right? Because now all of a sudden they're like, oh, that's a gate. And I can choose whether I unlock that gate because I've learned about it, or I can choose to climb it. I can choose to go around it. I can choose, like I can choose all these things, right? But it's like without the awareness of it, right? Without it being called out, it just feels, like, and this is one thing that I remember, especially in college, right? The things felt foreign, things felt unnatural constantly. But everybody was saying that's the way shit goes. Like, that's how you do it. No one was saying that that is actually oppressive. It felt oppressive. I knew in my body that it was oppressive, right? I knew that I was losing my voice and I was losing myself, but nobody acknowledged that. And so when I became a teacher, I was like, I'm gonna acknowledge it. Do you feel like you are being oppressed right now? That's because this is oppressive, right? Me telling you to sound like this in your essay is oppressive, right? Me telling you that it has to be in this order is oppressive. Me telling you that your sentence has to flow like this is oppressive, right? I'm not there's a portion of it that is cutting out your cultural experience, that's cutting out your neighborhoods, that's cutting out your families. And if you feel angry about that, that's good, right? That's okay. Like that is it, right? That's the thing about how toxic some of this stuff actually is. But knowing it gives you the ability to say, do I want to use my knowledge of it and how? So, for example, I learned, and all of us did, right, how to speak the language of academia, which then puts us in this position where we can tear it apart if we want,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
And so doing it like and knowing at some point my college career turned because I knew I was doing that, right? And so I could be excited about what the next step was. If I never recognized that, I'd probably still be somewhere miserable, like have that own disconnect with myself, have like this self-doubt that continues on because of it. And I think it's similar for our students. Once they know that people know that there's some sort of wrongness with some of this, then it's part of like being seen, right? It's part of that. Like you're saying, like, I see you, like, and I see what this does to you, right? And I see what this does, and we can be a collective around this, and also we can use it. And so I think naming it while it's difficult, it can also be really fun,
Mm-hmm.
right? It can be really fun because it's one of those things where everybody's like, "Oh yeah, I knew that." You know, like
Well, I
like
think
I knew I
like
was right.
you're kind of like, they talk about this around in the civil rights movement in a way around that how they would sing these songs, about the oppressor and singing the songs, and they were kind of making fun of it to kind of take the power away, So when you say something like, "Oh, it's the key to the gate," or it's like disempowering that oppressive system because now you're joking about it, you're keeping it light, which I think also really helps the students feel more in control and feel like they can do something about it, like that this big scary beast isn't that scary at all, right? So it's really cool.
Well, I think it also gives them us as an educator, and it gives the students the courage to go ahead and take a step to be curious, right? When they start naming that. And so that's our 20-minute conversation. Like timer. But definitely I think it's I think it opens up to courage. And like I knew there was something else out there as a college student for me, but I didn't know what it was. And so for me to take that have the courage to take that step out to follow whatever it was to go to college, was big. But a lot of our families take that have that courage to take that step. Our immigrant students families have had the courage to take that step to cross the border and leave their families and start a new life. And I like to connect that to our students taking that step into unknown territory.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I'm super excited about, the thing that you're talking about with like courage, I've already seen a difference in my classroom from this, but I'm moving to no grading policy, and that's based on Fabiola Torres, who is doing work on that, the ethnic studies teacher. I believe Kristen Land is going to be working with, and it's like this idea of really kind of like collaborative work around assessment of students' growth rather than this ABCD thing, right? And I was, what was kind of part of the reason I was like, I'm just going to move to it, because like I was trying to find all these ways of like grading but not grading, points but not points, like, and I kept saying like points don't really matter, but they did matter, like, or like, this isn't really like this grade doesn't really reflect, but it's like it still has an impact, right? So if you give a student a C on a paper, even though they've had such growth in the time that you've known them and worked with them, that you're still giving them a C, that what they see is the C, right? Like it's like they might have put so much effort and changed and talked and done all these things, and they're still seeing a C, and that's still being internalized, especially because we come from a system that we know and we've been taught how to internalize A, B, C, D. And so like that, I didn't want to do that anymore. Like I don't want to do it anymore. And so now I'm going to no grading policy. And the no grading means that like I'm not giving A, B, C, D, Fs. We're giving incompletes or completes. And we're looking like, how did you satisfy the requirements of this assignment? Where have you grown? Where do we need to fix things? Where do we need to talk about, like those things that matter, right? Or are the discussions we're going to have, and then that's it. Like that's the end. And so there might be people that I have to give an A because that's how how we're forced to grade at the college. And somebody might look at their work and say it's a C, but because I've worked closely with that student, I can say, well, they're satisfying the requirement. They're working hard to, figure out their resources on how to make sure that they can do these things. That person that's telling me that they deserve a C or rather than an A needs to figure out, are they being biased? Are they really being like judging the work based on whether they like it or not? Are they holding them to a white supremacist standard, right? That I personally don't believe in. So the conversation about C and A doesn't, like work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I don't know. It's been, and it takes for the student, like now they're like, oh, well, when I do something, you ask me to do something and I've never done it before, I'm straight up going to try it because I'm not going to fail. You're going to talk to me about it. And I've seen it already. Like it's like third class in, and they're really taking risks, like taking real risks. And it's like, it's so warm in a way, then, and kind of like just, I don't know, like there's like a lack of a weight both on both sides. Because then as an instructor and as an instructor that like is really trying to be conscious of the ways in which I can hurt my own community that I'm here to serve. I like it feels good to know that I'm going to treat every person in that room like a human being, right? I'm going to give every person time. And that's the commitment that I've made because grades make it so easy to not, right?
Mm.
To say like, oh, well, you know what that C means. You know what a B means. You know what that means, right?
Yeah.
And so it just puts more pressure on me, but it also puts less pressure on me. I don't know how to explain it, like it's just different. And so, I mean, I might by the end of the semester when I've talked to everybody like 100 times, I might like be on the floor and you guys might have to mop me up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things of being a social justice educator, exhausting, right? Because you are really putting in a lot of energy and a lot of time to try to teach in a way that matches up with your values. And that's what I hear from all of us talking about, that's what it is like you're trying to teach in a way that matches up with social justice values. And it takes a lot of time and energy. But I also hear that it's also about trying things, right? Experimenting and trying different things and seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, but to not kind of just get stuck in doing the same thing over and over and over again. Because that kind of rigidity, that is part of one of those like white supremacist values, right? When you're not willing to reflect or change, or, you're too afraid of conflict or any of those kinds of things that might keep you stagnant. And I hear us all really pushing ourselves, around those things so that we can be social justice educators. So I definitely invite other people to try some things.
And be courageous and take that step forward. And read more about Fabiola Torres's work on the no grading policy. Thank you for sharing that, Monique. I again always felt as a teacher like, okay, I'm going to give you 2 points for each assignment. You know, you either you did it, it's incomplete, or you didn't, right? Like, and it's incomplete. Yeah, so being able to hear like, oh, that's the missing piece I've had like in my class is good. Like, that was just an aha moment for me. That's like, oh, okay, now I got to go read more on her, because it's like I want to hear the students' voices. Like, and there's no right or wrong answer on what they're telling me, right? On their reflection, on their reaction, to guest speakers, or whatever the topic is in my psychology counseling class, my human development class. There's no right or wrong answers. But I need to hear their voices, right? So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and just as a resource, there is, if anybody wants to learn more about Fabiola's work on @ONE, the community college online training site, they have a whole equity module, and she has a video there about the very thing. And it's all free. You can just go to @ONE and put in their search bar equity, and the module will come up. They have all kinds of really great videos there, particularly around online teaching. So it's a good place to start.
And I think like if anybody's listening and thinking like, oh, I really want to try that, but I don't know how, just try it. And like know that there's a group of other people, right? Now I'm be like, Sandra, how's that going? Right? Like there are other people that are trying it, like, and it's just such a reflective process. It's really, really good for everybody in the classroom, including the instructor.
I think, isn't Michael Thompson, he's done some workshops around, I think it's called Grading for Equity. And I know I think it's called contract grading is part of it too. So if you can Google, you can try things, you can just Google and see what comes up. We're so lucky to live in this time where you got all the answers right at your fingertips.
Right.
Right.
And we can go on and talk for another 2 hours about education, but if you're listening, definitely leave some comments and maybe some ideas of some of the topics that we can have on our Brown Bag podcast for Carmen, Monique, and I to share in the conversation. We have a great lineup in our schedule for this upcoming academic year, and we're excited to bring in our guests to share like the different things that they're doing with their communities, and working with students in particular, community college students in particular.
So do we want to end on our exit ticket? Any recommendations you have for our listeners?
Well, I'm going to veer away from my usual screen recommendations because there's just too many. There's so many good things on, so many good things to watch. I cannot stop listening to Beyonce's new album, Renaissance. It is so good. So good. It's super full. Like if you need to clean your room or your office or your house, just turn it on because it's just total dancey. It's very 70s. It's very house music. It's very trap music, hip hop. She's got everything in there. She worked with so many artists. She sampled so many artists. It's just this wonderful curated collage of music it's impeccable and hard to stop listening to. So if you're a Beyonce fan, I'm sure you already have it. If you're on the fence about Beyonce, this album has won people over that I know. They're like, oh my God, I am now a fan of Beyonce because of this album. If you like house music and dance music, it's perfect. So check it out.
Cool. Definitely have a comadre night, a girls' night out. Like definitely things are, opening up again. And that's my place of healing is with my girls. And so, yeah. I'm just going to make that recommendation.
Since Carmen didn't recommend a show, I'm going to recommend Never Have I Ever.
Yay!
So it satisfies all the little teenager left inside of you, especially if you're a woman of color because it's a, it's like, 90210, Saved by the Bell, all those shows never had anyone that really like was the main character that had something in common with you. And this is the, new version of those things where you can actually like see your little teenage self just so happy. And it's so much drama.
Aren't funny. A League of Their Own on Prime. They did like a remake of it. It's very, very good.
Oh, is it?
Is it good?
Oh,
Like
cool.
it's very LGBTQ.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's
Cool.
those. That's like the center of it. It's
Nice.
good.
Cool.
You listen.